All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're going to untangle the truly wild, cutting-edge science of AI drug discovery, but we're also looking at the surprisingly intense legal framework you actually need to keep this whole system from just falling apart. It's this fascinating crossroads where biology meets code and where cutting-edge tech slams right into age-old legal principles. So, here is our roadmap for today. 1. Pharma's billion-dollar problem. 2. Generative AI accelerates discovery. 3. The legal and IP minefield. 4. Algorithmic bias and ethics. 5. Resolving conflict through mediation. And finally, 6. The future of innovation. Let's get to it.
Part 1. Pharma's billion-dollar problem.
We really need to start with the status quo of the pharmaceutical industry because, frankly, it's a massive, incredibly expensive hurdle for modern medicine. Before an AI even enters the picture, we have to look at the reality of traditional, human-led screening. Historically, researchers have literally had to manually screen thousands, sometimes millions of molecules just to identify a single viable drug candidate. It is an exhausting trial and error process that leans heavily on physical laboratory work. Because of all that manual labor, the answer to our question is years, often well over a decade, and it carries a staggering price tag of over $1 billion. Plus, there's a notoriously high risk of failure in preclinical and clinical development before a medicine ever reaches a patient. So you can see exactly why the industry has been practically begging for a more targeted, efficient strategy. Which brings us to Section 2. Generative AI accelerates discovery. Now, what's really wild about this next phase is how machine learning completely flips that traditional timeline upside down. Generative AI isn't just analyzing old data, it's actively designing entirely new molecular structures. So instead of endless trial and error in a physical lab, generative AI processes massive biological data sets to predict molecular behavior. It can estimate toxicity, absorption, metabolism, and efficacy in a fraction of the time. You are radically shortening the timeline and slashing operational costs by just weeding out the bad compounds right out of the gate. And hey, this isn't just theory. Real-world companies are doing this right now, turning drug development into a fast, cost-effective reality. Take Insilico Medicine. They successfully developed an AI-designed drug candidate for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis way faster than the usual timeline. Then you have Exscientia, who advanced AI-designed molecules directly into clinical trials. And Recursion Pharmaceuticals, they're analyzing millions of biological images to spot hidden patterns and novel drug targets that human researchers would easily overlook. Moving on to Section 3, the legal and IP minefield. Okay, so the science is moving at lightning speed, right? But here is the crucial catch. Just as the science gets easier, the legalities become an absolute nightmare. We're looking at a huge tangled mess of risks here. AI systems need massive data sets full of sensitive patient records and genomic info. That makes them a goldmine for cybercriminals. If there's a data breach, the liability is astronomical. Actually, healthcare data breaches are notoriously the most expensive of any industry, often hitting well over $10 million a pop. On top of that, you've got complex contractual risks. Pharma companies rely heavily on external AI vendors, and poorly drafted contracts can trigger vicious disputes over software licensing and vendor dependency. But this might be the biggest legal headache of all. Patent laws in most jurisdictions strictly recognize human inventors. So, when an AI system spits out a completely novel molecule, you get massive uncertainty over who gets the credit. Is it the human who prompted the AI, the software developer, the pharma company? You can bet this uncertainty leads to incredibly intense intellectual property battles. All right, Section 4. Algorithmic bias and ethics. Let's pivot to the ethical side for a second, because this introduces an even deeper complication with the data these AI models actually learn from. At the end of the day, generative AI is only as good as its training data. If the AI is acting like a black box and learning from flawed, unrepresentative historical data, the drug candidates it comes up with might not perform equally well for everyone. It's just the harsh reality of the math. So instead of democratizing global health, a biased AI could inadvertently widen healthcare disparities, leaving certain populations with fewer treatment options simply because they weren't adequately represented in the datasets. Which leads us to Section 5, resolving conflict through mediation. So let's look at the whole picture. We have billion-dollar tech, massive patent uncertainty, and huge data privacy fears. What happens when these giant pharma AI partnerships inevitably clash over an IP or data dispute? And how do we fix it without completely destroying the innovation? Well, the knee-jerk reaction is to sue. But hostile, public, super expensive courtroom litigation, it destroys partnerships and drains vital R&D funds. It can drag on for years. Mediation, on the other hand, is private, it's neutral, and it's highly cooperative. It focuses on finding practical solutions instead of battling it out in public records. And surprisingly enough, the exact blueprint we need to untangle these multi-million-dollar AI pharma disputes is the very same one used by high-conflict couples dividing assets in a divorce. In divorce mediation, couples use a neutral professional to negotiate a fair settlement, keeping a judge from making a blind ruling. Well, in the high-stakes world of pharmaceutical development, companies are turning to this exact same structured framework to divide intellectual property and allocate shared liabilities. The process follows these precise steps. First, you bring in a neutral mediator to guide things. Then, both sides gather all those complex financial records, software licenses, and patent docs. A really key feature here is the private caucus. That's where the mediator meets separately with each party to discuss sensitive concerns and brainstorm ideas without an immediate confrontation. Finally, they draft a settlement agreement. This keeps the intellectual property safe, lowers the tension, and crucially prevents a judge who might not understand generative AI from making a blind ruling on complex scientific assets. This mediation framework is perfectly tailored for the pharmaceutical industry. The absolute biggest advantage? Strict privacy. Look, court proceedings almost always become public record, but mediation stays totally confidential. That means proprietary AI algorithms, trade secrets, and sensitive patient data never get exposed to competitors or cybercriminals. Plus, it resolves the dispute significantly faster and slashes legal costs, keeping that money exactly where it belongs, in research and development. Finally, Section 6, the future of innovation. We've looked at the billion-dollar problem, the AI solution, the legal mess of inventorship, and the mediation framework used to resolve those disputes. That brings us to the horizon of global healthcare. The future is going to demand strong human oversight. We are moving toward precision medicine, where AI tailors treatments to specific patient groups based on their actual clinical and genetic data. But for this to work, regulatory bodies like the FDA in the US, the EMA in Europe, and the CDSCO in India are demanding rigorous scientific validation. AI-generated predictions cannot replace actual clinical trials. We absolutely need transparent, bias-free AI governance and legally sound partnerships to ensure these breakthroughs safely reach the patients who need them most. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Will our greatest medical breakthroughs be defined by the AI that invents them or by the human cooperation that actually delivers them? Because while artificial intelligence can design a miracle molecule in a fraction of a second, technology alone just isn't enough. It requires human frameworks, our legal structures, our ethical oversight, and our ability to mediate conflict to turn those digital predictions into real-world cures. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how the future is being built.